Greetings. I hope all are well. How's the sound? Hope the sound is better. Can I be heard? Can I be heard? Testing, testing. 1, 2. Testing, testing. 1, 2. Okay. Testing, testing. Testing, testing. 1, 2. Testing, testing. The sound is good. Okay. Rahubat. Had a few technical difficulties, but welcome to Actual Facts, episode 11. Appreciate you all tuning in. I hope you can hear me well because you do not want to miss this episode. This episode is called, as you can see, The Ugly Face of Islam Revealed, the dismantling of this ugly face of this religious doctrine. Now, Tawutak, I appreciate that. Have you all, I hope you all have been tuning in. I appreciate all of the support and the people that have subscribed. And I also make sure you let me know if the sound is good. I don't want anyone to miss anything. So again, this is a 3-part series called The Destruction of Religion. And in this episode, we're going to cover some Islamic doctrine, the doctrine of Islam that has plagued the world over. There's been millions, billions of people converting to this particular Arab doctrine that has been around since about 532, right? AD. Let's say 570 to 632. The birth of a being by the name of Muhammad Mustafa Al-Amin, he's known as, with a book known as the Koran. And in the religious world, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of, let's say, discrepancies as it relates to this doctrine. This doctrine has plagued the minds of our people for the last 1,400 years. And many of our people around the world, particularly the Africans of the diaspora and the Africans on the continent who have converted to this doctrine, are not aware of the intricate details that evolved out of the translations of the Quran, the customs, the details of the so-called Sahaba of the prophet Muhammad, that the Arabs claim was the last and the seal of the prophet. A lot of our people, when they convert, because they don't know its history, they are not too clear on the influence of other religious doctrines. They're not clear on the influence of the Catholic Church, the Jews, and the history of the Arab culture and how it came out of, and the history behind the environment by which the influence was created from outsiders to control the Arab slave trade and control the trade routes within Mecca and Medina at the time. And so we're going to try to cover as much as we can about Islam in a way that it's for the layman, of course, because many people are just not aware because you don't have objective doctrines or teachings or factual information as it relates to these religious doctrines. And of course, this is the first part of a 3-part series. Again, we're going to cover Islam today. We're going to cover Yahweh or Hebrewism, Yahwehism or Mosesism next week. And we're going to cover the Christianity in February. So I think that we should start with one. I want to always make reference to the one and only the source of this doctrine that emanates from the Actual Facts podcast, from His Excellency Dr. Malachi Z. York, right? Panabab Yanun, our Heavenly Father in flesh, incarnated to teach and raise the lost souls of the planet, to gather them and restore their ancient spiritual science that is known as Wusabat, which is core and based on factual information. And this factual information is confirmable. It has scientific proof. It has archaeological proof. And as you know, if you are a subscriber and if you're just joining in, then you'll know from the previous episodes, if you watch them, that our criteria is strictly based on actual facts. There's no feelings involved. There's no opinions. There's not anything emotionally attached. The only areas that we are concerned with is the reasoning part of the minds of our people and getting them the facts so they can make a decision and make decisions based on uh, information that we are revealing that has been lost. And the master teacher, right, has done such an incredible job over the last 50 years by teaching this doctrine and raising us in a series of books, particularly in a series of Islam. He's written over hundreds of books on Islam. As you know, we were taught Islam for 25 years. He taught Islam for 25 years. He speaks the Arabic language. He has translated the Quran. A lot of people may say, well, what makes him a such a scholar of Islam? A lot of the Arabs around the world want to make claims as Islam as an exclusive religion of theirs, and therefore they have a monopoly on the doctrine. Maybe because they feel like the Arabic language is a language that they speak, and because they speak it, others may not. Right? Then they feel as though, oh, then we are superior in our doctrine when it comes to converting people to in Islam or explaining Islam. But that's not necessarily the case, because there are many people that speak English and they're not masters of the English language. There's many people that speak French, but they're not fluent in French. They may know a few French words. They may speak the language, but not know how to read it. They may understand the linguistic grammar, but not understand the rules or the various dialects that you find amongst the Middle Eastern cultures. And amongst the Middle Eastern cultures, you find various dialects of Arabic. And so Arabic is not, just because you speak Arabic doesn't give you the let's say, it doesn't allow you to have a criteria that says you are the standard of what we to reach for when it comes to understanding this book. No. So and especially when it comes to Africans or Africans in the diaspora. So I want you all, if you can, just to and share the channel and let people know that we are live. This is anticipated because many people, Christians, Muslims, and Jews, or let's say Christians and Jews, are not aware of Islam. And they're not aware of the book. They're not aware of how it came about. They're not aware of the history and of the Torah and how it ties in to the Quran, and how the Quran told uh, the readers of it to go to the Torah if they were, let's say, confused, as you read in the Quran chapter 2. Now, the Quran itself, I'm gonna just give you a brief history. The Quran itself is 114 books that they say Muslims claim, right? Muslims, whatever sect you belong to, it doesn't matter whether you're the Nation of Islam, whether you're Sunni, whether you're Shiite, whoever you are. If you've converted to these religion, this doctrine, there's many sects of Islam, and many people are converting every day, and just they're told to accept and believe this book. Accept and believe. They take their shahada and say, well, I bear witness that there's no God but God, right? And that Muhammad is his messenger. This is a simple shahada, which is a bearing of witness that converts a person to the Islamic religion. Well, when you look at it from the outside, right, it looks pretty much similar to older Hebraic cultures. When you see the kufi of the Muslims, you'll see a kufi that they wear, and you'll also see the jalabiya, which is the long white robe. Somewhere black, somewhere different colors. Depends on where you are in the Eastern cultures or around the world. You may be in Yemen, you may be in Saudi Arabia, you may be in Qatar, you may be in Algeria. Wherever you are, they have different clothing influence within the Islamic culture that they grab from and stole from different other cultures. As you see, the Catholics wear the kufi or the kippah as well. The Jews also wear the kufi or the kippah, that they call it a tagia, at the top of their head. So on the outskirts looking in, it's a combination of many different religious doctrines, simply because the time that Muhammad was born in that area, the Arabs, right, and when he was born in 570, they were a conglomeration of many cultures, from the Jews to the Catholics to Christians to the Romans, to a lot of influence from the Torah, a lot of influence from the Persian scripts. You remember that the uh, Iraq and Iran is ancient Mesopotamia and Persia. So those cultures are there as well. So we're going to dive into what do we mean by dismantling the ugly face? Well, Islam has a very, very ugly face that's hidden behind their doctrine of superiority. Typically, when a person, especially Africans, when they convert, they are taught that they are less than the Arabs, because their Quran teaches that the Arabs are the best of the people. In their book, it teaches that the Arabic language is the best of languages. It teaches that that Muhammad was sent to a select group of people, contrary to what the Islamic world teaches, that he was sent to the whole world. The Quran doesn't speak to that. So we're going to dive into that as well. We're also going to dive into the authenticity of the Quran, whether the Quran is original, right? Muslims around the world, they say the Quran is untampered, untouched, undiluted, and then they say that their prophet couldn't read or write. Muhammad was Umayyad, is the word that they use in their book, right? And you say, well, what does Umayyad mean? It means he was illiterate. That means he didn't speak he couldn't write, let's say, couldn't read, right? Not speak. He spoke, obviously he spoke, right? My point is that Umayyad, the word Umayyad means illiterate, that he couldn't read, right, or write, right? So when they say that, they're giving you the impression that he didn't write the Quran, but yet they say the Quran is authentic, or the Quran comes from Muhammad. So the question would be, how did he get the Quran? Where did he get it from? If he couldn't read or write, how is it that they have a book, right, that says that this book is from Allah? Who wrote it? Where did it come from? If he didn't write it, who compiled it? Who confirmed its authenticity? Right? We're going to address if it's in its original order, because they oftentimes attack the Christian world and the Christian Bible, right? Or the Torah of the Old Testament, the Christians' New Testament, the Hebrews' Old Testament. They attack it and say, oh, it's not unauthentic, it's not original, it's tampered with, etc. And then they don't take the same scrutiny and eyes and critique to their Quran. They don't do that. We will do that in the actual facts. The Father has taught us in a series of books. One, I'll name the books that we'll be making reference to, and other sources, so that you can do your own research and find out more about this religious doctrine, if you were being tempted to convert or have listened to Muslims and really don't know what they're talking about in their because in other words, the tactic that's used is, you don't know the Quran like we know, therefore let me teach you. We're not going to fall for those games again. And so the Father has a list of books, obviously, that are available, that covers this topic. The one of them, which is one of the most popular, and it came out in 1994, is the Quran Authentic, right? The Quran is the Quran Authentic. It goes into, as we spoke about, the original Quran. Where did it come from? Who wrote it, right? And how was it confirmed? If Muhammad couldn't read or write, who confirmed its authenticity? Another book that we're going to cover is The Glory of Jesus the Messiah. A lot of people are not aware, particularly Christians and Muslims themselves, are not aware that Yahshua or Isa is spoken of more times in the Quran than the Prophet Muhammad himself. He's the most exalted prophet in the Quran. We're going to cover that. We're also going to cover um, the book that the Father recently wrote, called the Who is God, Male and Female, or Female and Male, and the God of Light and Fire, Rahubat. So when you talk about the God of Light and Fire, he's speaking about this particular God that they say is El Noru, or the light, right? They say Anoru, Asamawati, of heaven, right? Of heaven, water, earth, and earth. So they say Allah is the light of heaven and earth, and they give him as a symbolic characteristics of fire. You'll see this fire pop up in the Old Testament as well, where they say, well, this is a law or God, and he was speaking from a burning bush. And they say, well, God sends down, or Allah comes in the form of a fire as a light, right? And they don't explain why is he considered light. What type of light? Is he fire as in flame? What type of light? Is he the sun? What type of fire or light are you claiming this God is, or this being is? And the Father touches on that topic in is the God of light and fire. This is an actual fact. Right. Pagadad Shalal Nawar Wu Narar. Exactly. Tawatek. I appreciate that. So you'll see the title in the chat. This is called the God. Also, we're going to touch on the Proverbs of Yanun. Right. He speaks about the Arab slave trade. We're going to touch on that as well. So we have a lot to cover. We may need an episode 2. Well, hopefully we just cover as much as we can. With your questions, we'll get into questions as well. That was one. And then also, let me explain to you this. Dr. Malachi Z. York has translated the Quran from the original text, not text, from the original Arabic language by which the oldest Qurans have been translated from. Now, when we say oldest, we're not saying original, because there's only one person with an original hand copy Quran from the family of Muhammad that was authorized from Ahlul Bayt, which is the family of the house of Muhammad. And we're going to cover why there were actually 2 Muhammads at the time that Muhammad was alive. Right? You have an original and you have an imposter. And this is all in Islamic scholarship and the academic books and the universities. They teach about a being by the name of Musalimat, who was a poet. And he wanted to share the Prophet Muhammad's title at the time, in the same time frame in Saudi, in Arabia, where they even met and I had a conversation. And so it's just a lot to cover and unpack. And obviously, if it wasn't for His Excellency Dr. Malachi Z. York, who taught Islam as As-Sayyid Al-Imam Isa Al-Hadi Al-Mahdi for 25 years, we wouldn't have this information, because the Arab world has definitely covered it up. Another thing we want to touch on is the Arab slave trade. The Arab slave trade, it just recently was outlawed in this last century. Like I think Mauritania, if we give the references and the quotes for your own research, just outlawed slavery. Saudi Arabia just outlawed slavery. Some countries still practice slavery, and they still acknowledge that slavery is a part of the Quran, which they allow to take place, because it speaks about having just decisions when you dealing with your slaves or people of the right hand, or your property, as it speaks about in their Quran, meaning you can have property as women. They have property as they look at women as their property, and they look at blacks or Zinjis as their property, which are Africans that they enslaved in East Africa, all throughout Northern Africa. This is why you see a lot of racism that's out throughout Morocco. You see a lot of Berbers. A lot of them are pale skin. Islam, the religion of Islam, unmasked as well. Thank you for that. The Muslims Creed, true or false, that's available as well, right? Debates with the Muslims. These are books that Dr. Malachi Z. York has written pertaining to Islam, and other scrolls that have Islamic references or Quranic references in there, so you can wake up. It's not just about the Hebrew doctrine that has enslaved you, because the Hebrews are under a spell as well, following the Jebusites and trying to be a part of the Israelite seed, which is from Mesopotamia, right? But also the Christian doctrine that has you enslaved by the Greeks and the Romans rendition, and they created Yahshua or Bar Jesus, right? We have a book called The Real Trinity that covers these 3 Jesuses that we'll touch on in the Christian episode. Now, when you deal with the slavery aspect, this is a part that really the ugly face that needs to be covered, because a lot of our people are not aware. So let's get into a little bit about Muhammad and not a little bit, enough, so you have just a basic overstanding. When Muhammad was born, he was born on a Monday, August 20th, in 570. He died in 632. This is in Arabia, right? So he in the Islamic calendar, Muhammad was born on the 12th They call it Rabil Awal, which is the year of the elephant. Now he had his parents, right? Obviously two parents. Amina and Abdullah, right? Both of them were from the Quraysh tribe, right? The Quraysh tribe is a tribe meaning big fish, or literally big fish or reptilian. And it was a title given to Fi bin Mubarak or Malek, which in 208 AD in the 3rd century, right? So when you see this Quraysh tribe or Quraysh dialect or Quraysh name or word, know that this Prophet Muhammad came from that descendancy or came from the Quraysh tribe, right? And his family was of this Quraysh tribe. These tribes united as one because they were conflicting amongst in the Arab world, in these deserts, in their nomadic behavior, their nomadic culture, which living in the desert, they were not too well organized, and there was a lot of conflicts amongst them. And you'll find the history of Islam and a glimpse of Islamic history. It gives you the details, small details of the behaviors of the Arabs and the mentality. So when you run across them in the Middle East, right, you'll see it's no Middle East, but you'll understand the mentality of them and why they live the way that they live is because the nomadic environment, the harsh conditions, and the desert. And then there was no central government. They had basically particular chiefs over these tribes, and a lot of them went to war. So what it describes them in the Islamic history by Ertan Faqih, right? It says that they lived they were a harsh, hard, tough race of men who, being unaccustomed to a gentler and more sophisticated modes of life, and were warlike. They were hostile, unorganized, and perpetual struggling mass of humanity, though habitually slow with words and actions. When their feelings were aroused, or that once their feelings were aroused, they were very swift to return an insult and injury, right? And so this is just a part of how they live. Now, Muhammad, because he was raised by his not his mother died early, and he actually at 25, right? His grandfather traveling in the caravan raised Muhammad, or picked him up and raised him moving forward in life. So Muhammad was given to Halima, returned to his mother at the age of 4, and Muhammad's mother had passed away. So he was stricken with grief at an early age, and so this is his life. And as time moved, he at some point went into in meditation. He claims that this angel Jibrail. Now, mind you, this is all in Mesopotamia. So this is in the areas where you have a lot of Persians, a lot of the Mesopotamian doctrines from Abraham had influenced this area. So Muhammad in his acceptance of this revelation that he claimed he received from this being called Gabriel, who Jibrail, which is a prophet of the Old Testament and in the New Testament, you see this Jibrail, angel of the Elohim, amongst particularly the known 7: Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, Uriel, Azariel, and I said Uriel, right? They had it's two others, not off the top of my head, I can't remember, but they are amongst that 7: Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel, Michael. You had Azariel, right? And one of the trumpet blowers, I think Raphael, right? I may have mentioned him, but Gabriel is in there, and Gabriel came as a man in the book of Daniel. This is the same angel that the prophet had said spoke to him and told him to read Ikra Bismi Rabbika Alladhi Khalaqa. It says, read in the name of your sustainer. And in that, he was told to read this particular book. Now, the question comes in, what book was he told to read? Right? Because if it was the Quran, then that means the Quran was compiled already, right? And if it was compiled already, that means that it was in a specific language. You ask a Muslim what language this Quran or book, now I'm not going to say Quran because it doesn't specify that the Quran was what he was told to read. It just says read. And a lot of Muslims will say, no, it doesn't mean read. It means recite, or it means because obviously the question would be, if Allah knew that Muhammad could not read, why would he tell him to read the Quran? That would be not all-knowing being, because Muhammad says, "Ma ana bakarian," I am not a reader, meaning I can't read this, right? And so he said, Muhammad, read, right? He says, "Ma ana bakari," I'm not a reader. So what was he told to read? And a lot of Muslims don't want to let you know that he was told to read the Torah. And this is in Surah Al-Baqarah, when chapter 2, which is the surah of the cow, he was told to read the Torah. But we'll get into that in the future. But let's discuss how this Quran came down. So what happens is they say, okay, well, Muhammad was told to read. He couldn't read. So the angel Gabriel placed it. It says he was open his heart and he was influenced and began to recite the Quran to his Sahaba, and the year 610. This was 610, 40 years he was called to prophethood by, right? In Saudi Arabia, 40 years old is a typical age for prophethood. Moses was 40 years old at the time as well, when, according to that book, he was called to prophethood or received a book, the Torah, and he went up into the mountain and received these tablets. But they don't explain it. But our Father explains it. So in the Quran, when you read this particular book or Quran, when it says that Muhammad wasn't able to read, then what book did he receive? So it's told that he was speaking or orating it to these Sahaba, and they were writing it down as they went forward, or as this over the period of 20 something years, he was reciting what he was hearing from his heart or hearing from his head, however it was given. But when you read the Quran, it just contradicts that, because there's third person speaking in there. There's first person speaking in there. It's not Muhammad speaking in some verses. In some verses, Muhammad, Gabriel is speaking. In some verses, Allah is speaking. In some verses, it's speaking about Allah, Muhammad, and Gabriel, or the angels at the same time. And this is what the Arabs don't want you to know, that once you begin to look into the Arabic of this Quran and this book, you'll see that it's a copy, or a let's say not an original, but a plagiarized. That's the word I'm looking for. That there was an original book, and then there was a copied or plagiarized book that the Arab world actually uses today. How do we know? Because there's chapters in the Quran that wasn't in the oldest. There's verses and rearrangements of the names of the chapters, like Fatiha, which is the first chapter that you see. Most Muslims, if you're aware, you see that the first chapter of the Quran is Fatiha. However, it wasn't revealed as the first chapter. As we just explained, Muhammad heard chapter 96 first, right? Where it says, Iqra bismi rabbika khalaka. And that chapter is Surah Al-A'la, which is a surah of the Most High, or the highest, that they say, right? Or the knower. Now, when you look at chapter 96, the question would be, how did chapter 96 become 96 when it was the first thing that Muhammad heard? If it was the first thing that he heard, it should be the first thing written down. And this is how you know that the chapters of the Quran were rearranged. So don't let Muslims tell you that it's in its original order. The first chapter, which is Fatiha, from the word opener, from the word fatah or fataha, which means to open, right? Where they get where they stole that word from Fatah, which was an Egyptian ancestor or an Egyptian deity, which means the opener, which also is in the book of Chronicles under Naftahum. You'll see Naftahum or Fatahum, or the Fatahites, which are the original Negroids or original Egyptians. But the word Fatiha, which means the opener, it wasn't the opening chapter, because it was originally revealed chapter 5. And the Father explains this in also the book called The Degree of Mohammedism, and the Quran itself, where his Quran that he translated, he placed the chapters back in their original order and gave the original names right, because took the names off, because the names are not the original names. The names were added later. None of the chapters were given names at the time. They were named later, 23 years after Muhammad died. So Muhammad never seen the Quran that Muslims have today. So if they're claiming that this authentic, you have to ask them, why are the chapters rearranged? Why are the chapters named and there's verses that are there that are not in the older manuscripts? And we'll read that in various references. But the point to backtrack is that when he received this book or this recitation, that he was told that he was a prophet. This was his he was going through some type of a confusion as to what prophet he was, or how was he a prophet based on the definition of the Quran and the chapter of the what you call the definition of a prophet in the Old Testament, or Nebi or Nebuah or Nebiyun, which is a prophet. How was he considered a prophet in the Quran when the Torah says in order for you to be called a prophet, you have to prophesize? You should be able to tell the future. Muhammad could not tell the future. So he wasn't a prophet based on the Torah's definition. So he was confused by the statement that he would be a Nebi, which he's not really called a Nebi. He's called Rasulullah, which is sent one, which gives another contextual overstanding, because a Rasul is one sent from who? Well, we'll get into that because in the glory of Jesus the Messiah, or is Jesus the God of the Quran, which is another book where Muslims say that, well, Muhammad is spoken of in the book of the New Testament, or the New Testament in the book of John. And they say, well, John or Yahshua spoke about Muhammad in the chapter 16 and in chapter 14, where it speaks about him being a comforter, or paraclete is the word that's being used in the Greek. Now, if Yahshua is speaking about Muhammad as the comforter, as one who he would send, then they have to have some correlation that Yahshua sent this comforter, or Yahshua sent this Muhammad. And is this why he's called Rasul? So then they were confused on where to place him. And the reason he was confused is because when he went to Khadijah, who was his wife, who married him, which a whole nother conspiratorial plot to marry or create a prophet or a learned man in the Middle East to control him so they control the trade. It was a whole plot that took place amongst the Romans, amongst the Catholics, amongst the Jews, and amongst the Arabs to create a prophet that will be raised up where people will follow. And if they controlled him, then they'll be able to control the finances within the area between Mecca and Medina, which was a huge trading route within the Middle East, a major hub for spices and gold and all types of caravans coming in. So there was a plot that took place, which most Arabs won't tell you about. This is why the Roman Catholics and the Roman Catholics and the Arabs have a very close relationship. You'll see that they have mosque and let's say cathedrals in the same environment, and they often hold hands together and create an alliance together, not necessarily hold hands, but has created an alliance together in order to control the finances there. So when Muhammad went to Waraka, who was Ibn Nafal, Waraka literally means paper. He was a Christian, right? Look this up. He was a Christian, and as a Christian, he agreed with Muhammad that he was a prophet. He agreed with Muhammad that he wasn't seeing demons, or he wasn't hallucinating, or he wasn't, I think Nejmun, they call it, crazy, right? He wasn't a person who was losing his mind, that he was indeed a prophet. But when he told him he was a prophet, he was giving him the Torah definition of a prophet. He was giving them the Christian definition of a prophet. And in order for him to be financed by Khadijah, because in his let's say crusades, he had to do what? He had to agree to place Mary and agree to place Yahshua in the Quran. A lot of people don't know that there's a chapter chapter 19 called Suratu Maryam, named after Yahshua's mother or Isa's mother? Why is there a chapter named after Jesus' mother and not a chapter named after Muhammad's mother? Right? Why is there a chapter or other prophets' mother? Is because there was a Catholic influence in Islam. And there's popes in Islam. These are your so-called Khalifa. Uthman, right? Abu Bakr, right? These main influences. Uthman, who was responsible for this new Quran that they have and burning the original Quran that Muhammad had given to verbally, that Ali, his son, and not his son, his son-in-law, the husband of Fatima. They had two sons, Ali Imam Hassan and Hussein, where the Shiites had created their sectarianism by following Ali as the rightful Khalifa. This is why the Muslim world argues over, right, who was the successor. You have a certain group that says it was Abu Bakr, a Sadiq, and then you have another group that says it was Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali, who was the blood family of Muhammad. So this is why you have two types of Muslims. I'm not talking about the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam has an entirely new doctrine created from a W.D. Fard, who came as an imposter of Abdul Wali Fard, which is the Nation of Islam sectarianism of the Muslim religion. They wear suit and ties and bow ties. They sell Final Call newspapers. Their leader is Farrakhan, and they have no idea of the history of Islam because they weren't taught that version of Islam. So my point is that in the Middle East, when you look at the Sunnis and you look at the Shiites, the Shiite are your Iranians, right? They call them the extremists. This is the terroristic group that they claim are terrorists and the extremists, because they have these rituals of Shiitism. And then you have the Sunnis, who are the pale Arabs, who have subdued or subjected the real Khalifa, or let's say successor of the Prophet Muhammad, by subjecting and trying to kill his blood family, who was Fatima and their two sons. And they literally have a ritual in Sunni Shiite Islam where they acknowledge the torturing of Ali, Imam Hassan, and Hussein, and they hit swords. If you ever look at some of the rituals where the Shiites, they have these swords and they hit themselves till they draw blood, which is a blood ritual. But the symbolism is that they are mimicking the abuse and the torture that the sons of Fatima and Ali took or went through when they were being chased and hunted down to do what? To remove the Quran from them and replace it with Musalimat's Quran, who was the imposter and wanted to share Muhammad's glory and prophethood. And Abu Bakr used his Quran and replaced it. Uthman used Musalimat's Quran and added 2 chapters there. And this is why they're arguing. This is what's going on in the Islamic world. Needless to say, none of them like Africans, none of them except blacks. All of them acknowledge that, and they say in the last days, when the people will be judged, your faces will be turned black, right? And